When President Trump was candidate Trump, he directed harsh words at a lot of people, but no group was targeted as much as undocumented immigrants, whom he accused en masse of crimes, blamed for U.S. economic stagnation, and promised to deport by the millions and repel with a wall. Trump was hardly the first national politician to concern the many New York residents who lack papers. Barack Obama removed 2 million people via immigration enforcement. But his rhetoric and that of some of his supporters was especially alarming to undocumented immigrants and their families. So as we focus on our theme of activism in the age of Trump this week, what are New Yorkers, in particular New York's immigrants, prepared to do to resist whatever the 45th president is planning? Let's ask some of the people helping to organize that fight. Abraham Paulos is the executive director of Families for Freedom. Welcome back to the show, Abe.
Thank you.
Thanu Yakupitiyage is the senior communications manager at the New York Immigration Coalition. Thanks for being here. And Yaritza Mendez is citywide outreach coordinator for Make the Road New York. I'm very glad you're here, too. So let's set the stage, Abe, with where we were up until January 19th, the Obama administration, its immigration record. I think it's fair for us to talk about that first. How do you view that in the rear view now?
Well, I mean, I think I want to make a clear, clarification real quick. Donald Trump, the first population isn't just the undocumented immigrant population. It's also just non-citizens who've had contact with the criminal system. So that's the population that I work with, and that's the population that I probably talk, more about, and I'm very clear about that. That population has actually been increasing as far as those that have been getting deported, particularly during the Bush era, in the Obama administration era. It's actually grown exponentially. So as long as that population, right, isn't really being talked about, and that population continues to get deported en masse, the undocumented immigrant population, again, which is very important, such as those with DACA, the Dreamers, and what have you, is that if we're not really having the conversation with deportations in general and starting to split up our communities by saying, oh, well, you guys have convictions, or you guys came at this age, or we're going to take your children and not the parents, we're really doing a disservice to our communities, because then it's really liberal organizations or quote-unquote advocates going into the community and basically splitting us up, basically doing the job of Immigration Customs Enforcement, ICE.
Uniting, has President Trump made a distinction among those groups, or is he speaking generally about people who do not have citizen status?
Well, I mean, to clarify, I think that where we are in terms of President Trump, it's not like President Obama was actually much different. He also was extremely divisive in terms of how it is that he spoke about immigrant populations. He often spoke about oh, well, we're only going to go after quote unquote criminals, right? And that same narrative is being continued. It's a harsher rhetoric, but it's the same rhetoric. And so, I definitely agree that we need to be extremely, extremely united and be very careful about how we're divisive, made to be divisive during this time, because it's exactly what Abraham says. There is a non-citizen population that is being, when Donald Trump makes these statements around who is a quote-unquote rapist and who is a this or who is a that, what he's trying to do is make it so that advocates are scrambling to protect certain groups over others. And for us at the New York Immigration Coalition, we're really trying to be as united as we can with all of our advocates and partners. I think that different organizations and different advocates have different roles to play, and so on the city and state level, we're really trying to make sure that there are resources to protect immigrants, regardless of immigration status.
So you're an outreach coordinator, so you obviously are working, I'm sure everyone is, especially in the communities. So you're talking to people who might be fearing what this president means, but what do they fear now that they didn't fear a few months ago? Has it really changed? Are they sensing a new threat? What's the feeling among the communities you talk to?
Well, first of all, I work with a lot of the immigrant population or community, and what I see on day in, day out is just folks fearing deportation. Am I going to be deported? What is going to happen with my kids, with my family members, the people that I'm leaving behind? Am I going to go back? And for those that are young, that came to the United States at a very early age, they're fearful of going back to a country that they really don't know. The United States, this is home for them, and going back to a country that they don't know is kind of fearful. So everything around deportation and how to protect their rights, how to protect the right of their family members, and that's what the fear is all about.
The commentary on what Trump has talked about throughout the campaign, a lot of the counter commentary was about what he could practically do. He was talking about deporting mass numbers of people, people said, oh, that's not possible, you can't possibly do that. Is there any safety in that, in the idea that he's not capable of doing some of the things he's talking about, or do we actually fear that he could in fact make good on what he's talking about?
Why is that the conversation, right? What he can do and what he can't do, right? That just really doesn't make sense. And I know a lot of people are talking about, where is he getting this number 2 million for, 3 million for? 900,000 New Yorkers signed up for ID NYC, right? 750,000 undocumented, like deportable people signed up for deferred action for childhood arrival. That's about, what, 1.5, 2 million just right there, in which we have names, addresses, or photos of, right? And so why is the conversation about how many he can deport and how many he can't deport, but really looking at the situation by saying, how are we going to protect our communities in real ways? Like, I feel like the fear isn't deportations. We've been fearing deportation since, because we're deportable, right? I feel like the fear really should be how we're gonna approach it. Are we gonna approach it in the same way that we've been approaching it? Which is basically like, oh, tell them who you are, tell them where you're at. I mean, you have people with weapons looking for people to deport, and the city decided, let's give them your name, cities, and addresses, and have this database without really thinking through what the community actually really needs. I don't think that this term sanctuary is really the term that we really need to be moving forward, right? Whether it's sanctuary city or building or whatever. I honestly think, like, is it sanctuary if they know where we're at? Is it sanctuary if folks are telling them we're going to protect you when we weren't protected through the data of NYCID, we weren't protected through DACA in a real way? And so the term sanctuary, I mean, I think I just, was reading about Anne Frank. You know what I mean? Like, no one knew, the Nazis didn't know where Anne Frank was. So to me, that's more sanctuary than to sort of say, like, open it up.
How do you react to this, the new president, or the threat that has been there for a while, but now is obviously ripening and perhaps evolving? What can we do?
I don't disagree with Abe. I actually think that there's like some real legitimate concerns. And yes, ID NYC, people's information has been retained. DACA, people's information has been retained. I think that what my concern and hopes for the current moment is that we figure out a way to support people who are in that situation, who are deportable. The government, and the city has their information, and there is a need at this point to work with the city in order to make sure that that data is purged and that we can do what we can to support people. I think that in terms of making sure that we actually meet community needs. I myself am not undocumented. I can speak as an immigrant and as someone who has had a lot of immigration trouble. That I do believe that people have agency, and that there is a way to decide for yourself whether you want to apply for this or not, whether you want ID NYC or not, whether you want to apply for DACA or not. But I think that moving forward, we do need to really think broader than we have been thinking about what actually it means to protect immigrants and how it is that we, either give people's information away or not. And I think
why would we trust the city though, Thanu? Why would we trust the city? There's home raids happening. Since March of 2015, there's been an increase in home raids in New York City. The city has not acknowledged it or publicly recognized it. There's been families that have been getting separated for such a long time, and the city didn't say anything about it. Now they're going to come out with a New York City ID.
Yaritza, I want to ask you, when people come to you with fears about the city, the state, the federal government, what do you say to them? Do people come in with fears that you feel are totally legitimate, and you say, yes, you have a right to be terrified? Can you reassure them at all? Do you feel like there's any safety in what the city and state are promising about providing some form of sanctuary?
We can now provide any kind of safety because, as Abe and we've been saying, the government can flip-flop whenever they want. They can say an argument today and change it the other day, or withhold any kind of information or data that might be useful for us as organizers and also for our community members. So what we can do is to provide them with the right kind of information. What are your rights? You are protected by the 4th, by the 5th Amendment of the Constitution, regardless of your immigration status. Not many people know that, and that kind of information is useful and should be disseminated to as many people as possible so that they know and they can make the right decision, but make one that is based on information that we have gathered throughout, shared within many allies, with legal departments, and so on and so forth, that is being developed as we go day in and day out. So that's what we have been doing, giving out information, doing a lot of Know Your Rights workshops, but at the same time, heating up the streets, making sure that the government knows that we are here to stay, regardless of any anti-immigrant or any platforms that he is using, and just to make sure that, you know, all of us are united, that is to put up that front, that it doesn't matter if I'm undocumented, if I'm not, if I'm Muslim, if I'm a woman, if I'm a male, that all of us can, you know, show that sisterhood and brotherhood and show that community. So that's what I think all of us should be doing.
And to respond a little bit, I do not think that we should blindly trust any institution, including the city. I do think
your organizations that went into the community and signed people's up, they have names.
Well, let's let finish on it.
Sorry.
But I do think that it is important for organizations like us to also push these institutions in order to protect people. Like, it is true that these, you know, that these people's names are in these databases. That is a fact. That's not changing at this point. And so we need to do what we can together to make sure that that shifts so that people are protected.
I want to talk about one particular institution because, and Yaritza, I want you to start on this one. The government agency people are most likely to have the most problematic interaction with, frankly, regardless of immigration status, is the NYPD. And the policies governing how they handle people's status have long been debated. And that bleeds into the correction system, too. In your experience, is the NYPD handling those interactions the way that they have promised they are supposed to, or are there problems there?
Well, it's funny that you say that because I was doing a Know Your Rights workshop, and there was a lieutenant from a prison in Jackson Heights who was saying that they don't ask the victim of their immigration status. But then when you look at, there has been a history of the NYPD sharing information with ICE, and then that's when the whole, the Rikers sharing information in terms of like the prisoners that they have withheld comes into about. And then what we do is just to make sure if we are hearing any kind of like those cases of victims that have gone to the NYPD or any kind of prison, and that the NYPD or those institutions are using that information against them, we're making sure that our communities are protected in that way, and we go to elected officials to make sure that we have, you know, factual data, a name, and a, you know, and an address to say, hey, you know, this happened to X, Y, and Z, and this shouldn't be happening. NYPD should not be making or doing the job of an ICE of ICE agents. Like, that should not be the case. I think that NYPD should stay away from that kind of information. They should stay as neutral as possible. They should be looking out for our protection and not to give us up regardless of immigration status.
But they're not. The NYPD has been giving out information on folks all the time. NYCID. The NYPD was the reason why they said, hey, we're going to like retain that information. So to sort of think that we're going to find some allies in the NYPD, I think is just, it's ludicrous.
But I'm not saying that we have. I'm just saying that if people have been a victim of that they shouldn't stay quiet. What I'm saying is that they should find a local organization that can help them voice those concerns, that can protect them. That's all I'm saying. And I'm saying that, you know, that hasn't been the case. I've said that there has been a history of NYPD sharing information with ICE, and I think that shouldn't happen moving forward.
That begs another question, actually, an important question, which is, does this problem have a color? I mean, Donald Trump, when he spoke about this problem, it was clear that there was an ethnic, racial angle to what he was saying that was embedded in his critique. But I know Irish people who are undocumented. I know Poles who have mixed up immigration status that, you know, leaves them and their children in precarious states. In terms of the way this problem operates in the city, is this a problem that affects communities of all different stripes, or because of the suspicion that it is largely a kind of person that is our problem, do certain communities feel like they're more under threat?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, this impacts Black and brown communities. You know, there's a way in which, like, you know, all of these things are connected, whether the NYPD's are harassing immigrants, or, you know, the ways in which a broken windows policy is impacting, like, particularly, like, Black communities. Like, all of those things are an intersection. So I think that obviously this is like a racialized issue as well, and you can see that from the way in which like Donald Trump and many people talk about this.
So we're in this point where we're faced with either a new face of an old threat or an evolving threat that's getting worse. What can we do, and what are your organizations doing? Start with you, Abe. What people who are watching who are terrified now?
There's a couple things that can be done. I mean, I think the city needs to publicly acknowledge and recognize the raids that have been happening in New York City, right? So that they can build trust with the immigrant community when they're saying we want to protect. I think there needs to be an apology for NYCID. I think your organizations. I know it's not on you guys, but in general, by saying, look, we didn't think it through. Sorry, we made a mistake. I think in general for my community and those that do have criminal convictions and those that are, essentially who have been getting raided, it's very simple. Don't answer the door, stay silent, ask for a lawyer.
Anything to add to that in terms of advice to communities and what your organization is doing to help the broader picture?
We're really working to make sure that there are legal resources available for immigrant communities. We're working to make sure that NYCID moving forward can be, as transparent and as protected as possible, and if that is not the case, to figure out what the alternative steps are. And we're really working to ensure that when we say sanctuary city, that this is beyond just like words that the governor or the mayor are saying, but that actually translates into tangible protections, and if need be, the ability to hide immigrants if necessary. I think that we're also working on a city and state level to ensure that immigrants have basic access to whether it's healthcare, whether it's housing, whether it's language access. These are all things that continue to be important in the Trump era.
What's the Make the Roads agenda?
Once again, we're doing Know Your Rights as widely as possible. We have been sharing our materials with as many allies as possible as well, and we want to continue doing that. We are developing more materials as we go along, based on the information that Trump is giving us day to day. We're encouraging community members to start talking about family preparedness or emergency plan at home, so that everyone knows what to do in case of an emergency. We want to encourage people to join the movement. There's so few of us on this side of the table, and we need more people to join us. We are going to continue the good fight. We're going to keep heating up the streets as often as we can, and we will continue to work with allies and elected officials to make sure that we are developing a strong plan for community members.
Thank you.
And we'll be saying be safe. That's crazy. We're
going to be following your organizations. Thank you so much for being on. Make the Road, NYSC, and Families for Freedom, resources for all of us as we face the Trump era. Now,